Hello there. Gonna do an old but a goodie. And this is written by a guy named George Cohen, 1917. It's called Over There. It's dedicated to all the boys overseas. Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Take it on the run, on the run, on the run. Hear them calling you and me as the son of liberty. Hurry right away, don't delay, go today. Make your daddy glad to have had such a lad. Tell your sweetheart not to pine, the proud boy in line. Over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. They're drumming everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over there. Johnny, get your gun, get your gun, get your gun. Johnny, show the Hun who's the son of a gun. Hoist your flag and let her fly. Yankee Doodle, do or die. Pack your little bit, show your grit, do your bit. Yankee to the ranks from the towns and the tanks. Make your mother proud of you. Your red, white, and blue. Over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drummers everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over there, over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. And drummers everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over there, over there, over there. Send the word over there. That the Yanks are coming, the Yanks are coming. The drummers everywhere. So prepare, say a prayer. Send the word to beware. We'll be over, we're coming over. And we won't come back till it's over there. It's been a long day. How you guys doing? Hope you enjoyed that little song. That actually was a very popular song during World War I. I don't know about my version of it, but you can look it up, or you can look it up on iTunes or something. Over There, George Cohen. It's a good tune, good little tune. Hopefully that'll stick in your head now. You can get out of your head and start singing Over There. Over there. Alright, well, we gotta get into it. And again, really appreciate you guys taking the time to sit here and watch these things. And hopefully they're somewhat interesting and enjoyable. So let's get back into World War I. So we've been looking at the Americans' involvement in World War I, how we started from neutrality. We looked today at the causes of or the reasons, I should say, why the United States actually decided to join the war effort. Again, probably the biggest one is going to be the unrestricted submarine warfare. And I think economic reasons as well. Again, like I said, the fact that you have both the Germans and the British who were impeding our neutrality on the seas, be it through torpedoing, blockades, whatever. So
And again, I think Wilson's moral diplomacy is also a really big part of this, making the world safe for democracy. And again, he really wanted to ensure that the United States had a significant say-so in the post-war world. And again, if we want to be part of that decision-making process, we got to get involved in the war. So, for numerous reasons, we get involved. We go over there, and the thing with Americans, when we first go over to Europe, we're going to see that we're totally not ready. Like in this picture behind my big old face here that you guys saw earlier today, we're coming with marching bands, and we just weren't quite ready for the conflict. In fact, our troops go overseas, and it's going to be a good 6-7 months or so before most Americans are actually going to see any real action, because we have to be trained. We have to learn about how to fight with the new technologies and trench warfare and all of that. So let's go ahead and look at our involvement in the war, but really most importantly, the College Board really wants you guys to know the significance of the United States in the war and the mobilization, really how the government is going to mobilize our country economically. So I'll spend quite a bit of time on that. It's not super exciting or anything, but it's very important for you guys to know that. So let me minimize myself here so I don't have to start my big old mug for the whole time. There I am. Okay, let's move on. Hey, that may be kind of weird. I totally screwed up, so I needed to restart that. So I don't know if that totally got cut off weird or whatever. But anyways, so one of the things you guys really need to know is that, like I said earlier today, that we were not ready for World War I. One of the things that our government's going to have to do is impose a draft. So that's the Selective Service Act. So you want to make sure that you guys highlight that. We needed guys to join the military. Because I said after the Civil War, there wasn't like a huge push to have guys in the military. So we needed people. So that's the purpose of the Selective Service Act. So 21 to 30, eventually, because of the horrors of World War I, in the trench warfare, all the new technologies, and the super high casualty rates, there's going to be a greater necessity to have more people join. So 18 to 45 are going to join. But again, the point being that our military is really not ready. We're going to go overseas. It really would have been suicide if our guys went out in the trenches like right away. So not going to do that. We're going to spend a good 6 or 7 months or so training in parts of France where it was kind of away from the Western Front. You'll have some guys training in Britain, just to learn about the new technologies and the new style of warfare that was going on during the time. We also had a shortage of rifles. Russia also had this really bad. A lot of guys, when they went out to war, not even in training, I'm talking about like they were like in the trenches. They didn't even have rifles. Some of them were relegated with like broomsticks or something like that. So imagine that, fighting the Germans with broomsticks, pretty crazy. But anyways, the United States also, maybe not quite that bad, but we definitely had a shortage of stuff. And even though you had Wilson's policy of preparedness, it still really wasn't quite enough for what was necessary to fight this war. Another thing that our government's going to have to do, probably more important than raising an army, there's nowhere to put me here. I'll put myself over there. I'll put myself over the Lady Liberty. There. We had to mobilize our economy. Because of the added expenses of the war, the debt of our country obviously is going to go up. So one of the ways that the government is going to gain revenue is through raising taxes. And you can see the tax rate was like ridiculous high. Some people's taxes were as high as 60-70% of their income, which is like crazy when you think about it. And the fact also that even though so many people's taxes went up significantly, it went up. The federal revenue went up 400% because of these new taxes. However, it wasn't even close what the government is actually going to need to be able to fight the war adequately. So one of the things the government's going to do, and we did this during the Civil War, and there were bonds that were also sold, like during the American Revolution. You had the purchase or the sale and purchase of these things called Liberty bonds, which is basically, it's a loan the government's taking out from the American people. So you could go to, you know, the post office or government agency, and you can purchase these bonds for, you know, $20,000, $50,000, whatever, and you take home like a little IOU like piece of paper thing, and, you know, the government owes you $500, and then you hold on to that for a certain amount of time, and then you can turn that in later, and, you know, most of the time you get some type of an interest back on those things. So it was a minor investment of people, but I think more importantly, it was a way for people to feel connected to the war. It was a way for them to participate in the war, because you got to understand that World War I was a total war. Everyone is going to play a part in this. It's not just the guys that are going to be serving overseas. You know, people here in the United States are going to be playing a huge role on the home front. And this was a way that a lot of people could very easily participate in the war effort, was to purchase a Liberty Bond. And, you know, to be honest with you, there was a lot of pressure for people to purchase these things. The Liberty Bonds actually is going to be, you know, one of the biggest sources of revenue that the government is going to get. So, you know, super important the government sell these things. Okay, you know, the government's going to get about $20 billion in income, which becomes their debt, as a result of selling these bonds. So, and they were very popular. Lots of people purchased them. There was a lot of propaganda, like this creepy propaganda poster. So, you know, here Lady Liberty is very eerily and creepingly looking at you saying, buy a Liberty Bond. And, you know, if that's supposedly supposed to pressure you into doing that. And this idea that if you don't purchase a Liberty Bond, well, you must be like unpatriotic or something. Okay, so, you know, and we're going to die. Buy a Liberty Bond lest I perish. So if you don't buy one, the whole concept of freedom and democracy, it's going to die. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Organizing industry. It's kind of a cool photograph in the background. Those are all artillery shells for the big artillery guns that are out there. So obviously the government has to shift to a wartime economy. And we're going to find that the government is going to really have to direct everything that's going on in terms of like production in particular. If you think about all the things that, you know, just not the United States needs, but all of the allied nations, you know, all of those soldiers and militaries, they need to have all of these shells. They need to have the uniforms, the food, the munitions, all of that. And what we're going to find is that the United States is going to be playing probably the largest role in producing and supplying these things to the Allies. And like I told you guys today, the main significance of the United States actually in World War I, again, very arrogant it sounds, but it is true, is that we provided so much of this stuff that it gives that necessary advantage to the Allies. It wasn't any of the technologies in terms of the gas warfare, the tanks or anything. No, it was us. It was us coming in, seeing over there, you know, with all this optimism that we have, and the fact that we have all these new troops that are willing to fight, that aren't hardened by the trench warfare. We've got the supplies that they need, the food they need. So, you know, we really play a really huge role in this. And again, we are pretty much the advantage that the Allies needed to be able to win this thing. So to direct the economy, what the government put together was an agency called the War Industries Board, WIB. You absolutely need to know the War Industries Board. So this is the government agency that really is directing production in the United States, and it's the WIB is going to go to, say, Ford Motor Company and say, look, you're not going to be producing Model T Fords. We need you to produce tanks, or we need you to produce trucks that we're going to send overseas for the war effort. Okay? And they're also going to set production goals and quotas, so they'll turn some factories into, you know, producing things like shells and guns and things like that, and they'll give these contracts to these businesses, and they'll say, okay, well, we need you to produce this much by this time, and this is what it's going to cost. So the government's directing all of that stuff. And, you know, if you kind of make a tie into the progressives, remember, this is still theoretically the progressive era. A lot of progressives really like this idea of the government regulating the economy like this. But your more conservatives are going to think that this is like socialism. And, of course, you're going to have a lot of critics of this type of a government agency that had so much control over the American economy during the time. But you look at the numbers. Industrial production did go up 20%, and again, that extra 20% is what the Allies is going to need. So what the War Industry Board did was pretty successful. One negative thing I guess you can look with this is that you look at who's getting these government contracts. It's not going to be, the little guy. It's not going to be, my husband who works in aerospace and they build airplane parts for like Boeing and stuff like that. The government's not going to give contracts to Lanik, which is my husband's business. They're going to give it to like these huge corporate businesses. So again, who's benefiting from this? It's Wall Street. It's the wealthiest 1%. It's not the little guy benefiting from it. I mean, overall, yes, everyone's going to benefit from this because the Allies are going to win, and we're going to see the United States emerges from the war really as the most powerful nation in the world. And most European nations are going to be looking to the United States now for loans and for help and stuff like that. So everyone will benefit in the long run. But initially during the war, in terms of like government contracts, it's really the wealthy that benefit the most. Now here's the guy that you guys need to know. Maybe you know who he is. This is Herbert Hoover. Okay. Who is Herbert Hoover? Raise your hand if you know who is Herbert Hoover. Don't tell me that he invented vacuum cleaners. Chris Padilla. Had to call you out on that one. No, Herbert Hoover eventually will become president of the United States. This is how he is going to make a name for himself. He is going to be the head of the Food Administration, which was established by the Lever Food and Fuel Act of 1917. So this guy was pretty brilliant in terms of, what he thinks about the war. He's really looking at the soldiers because those are the guys that are fighting this thing. And, if the soldiers aren't adequately nourished, how are they going to be able to fight in the war? So his big slogan is food will win the war. And he's right to a certain extent, because if you have a bunch of hungry people that are, out there and they're trying to fight, it's going to be really difficult. It's like, say you come to school one day and you didn't eat breakfast, which I'm sure some of you don't. You come to school, you don't eat breakfast, maybe you don't have a snack or a lunch, and by the end of the day, you feel like crap. You have a headache, you're really sluggish, and you're grumpy and cranky and just like, right? Well, think about being a soldier. Think about being a soldier and not having access to adequate food. So, he was pretty smart with that. So, he's going to put up these programs to conserve food products to actually send over to the troops. So there were things like, people could grow their own vegetables. They encouraged the development of what were called victory gardens. So that's a term that you should know. We'll see this again in World War II. There were also wheatless Wednesdays and meatless Mondays, and these were food products that were shipped. Any surplus or excess is going to be shipped overseas to the soldiers. So, and again, this is a really easy way also for a lot of Americans to take part in World War I, is they can be patriotic and be a soldier on the home front, so to speak, by growing their own gardens and conserving on food products. Some of you guys may be familiar with the idea of rationing. During World War I, the United States didn't ration. We were only involved in the war for, a year or so, year and a half, whatever. So there's really not a need for us to ration. European nations will do that, but we will ration during World War II. So we'll look at that in that particular unit. But key point, this right here is so important, that the United States, through Hoover's Food Administration program, we're going to export 3 times as much food as we had before the war. So think about, again, all of this food and other supplies as well going over to the Allies. Again, this is an example of how the United States really was that advantage, because the Central Powers are not going to have some other country out there in La La Land bringing them all kinds of supplies. They kind of have to rely upon what they have. So this is huge for the Allies. These are just a couple of propaganda posters in terms of what to conserve, what you can eat more of. So you can see at the top, this is put up by the U.S. Food Administration, which was, again, Hoover was part of that. Victory is a question of stamina. Send wheat, meat, fat, sugars. As a side note, just kind of out of interest, You'll see this in World War II as well. The government is gonna they're gonna try to convince women who are cooking like meats, like bacon, for instance, or hamburgers, whatever. And if you cook this stuff on top of the stove or grilled it, whatever, you know that there's a lot of grease that comes off of that. So the government was trying to get women to collect the grease that was coming off of the meats that they were cooking. They would conserve that, and then there were collection centers they could take it to. And don't try this at home. You could actually take that grease and you could turn it into glycerin, which is an agent used to make black powder, which is an explosive. So again, another way that people on the home front are going to be able to participate in the war effort. In addition to the food administration, you also had a fuel administration. So there also was this need to conserve energy and fuel. So we're going to try to combat wastefulness through things like gasless Sundays, heatless Mondays. You'll have the implementation of daylight savings, so you can get farmers out there working longer. Stepping up production of coal, gas, and oil. And the WIB will actually be setting quotas for various mines and oil fields and stuff like that. So, very important slide. The idea that the United States, we're kind of like that, again, that advantage that one of the sides was looking for. So we're the one that's providing all the major supplies for the most part, the food, the munitions, the soldiers, everything. We were that much needed boost that the struggling allies needed. And it also obviously is going to help our economy a lot as well, especially since a lot of the trade was cut off because of the blockades and whatnot. So all this food that we're sending over there and selling and to the European nations and the allied nations, and the continued loans and stuff that we're going to be putting out there, definitely going to help our economy. So key point. The government also is going to have to mobilize workers in the United States. Of course, the demand for a lot of these goods, airplanes and tanks and rifles and uniforms, all that's going to be pretty high. Because there's a higher demand for these goods, of course, it's going to cause wages to, go up somewhat. But what's important to remember about this is even though wages were going up, that you always have inflation during war. So when you have inflation, prices go up. So even though your wages are going up, the prices of everything's going up. Sometimes it's even more than your wages. So really the worker is not better off during World War I, even with higher wages. So you do then have union membership going up. You can see over 6,000 strikes during World War I, and this was super problematic for Woodrow Wilson because you can't win the war if you don't keep producing these things. So this was something that he had to really deal with. So there will be a government agency to deal with the labor issues. So of course, yes, you need to know the WLB, which is the National War Labor Board. And oh, look who it's headed up by a good friend, William H. Taft. And he did a really good job with this. With the NWLB, basically this was a government agency to keep production going. And like I said, we needed to keep that production going because if production stops, then the Allied troops are not going to be getting the supplies that they need. So it's really like the government and labor are really working together out of necessity during this time. So you'll have things like the government will push various industries that are getting government contracts to produce war goods to do things like 8-hour work days, recognize unions, equal pay for equal work, because there'll be a heck of a lot of women working in the factories. So, workers will get some of these benefits, and I bet you can guess that after the war, a lot of things are going to be taken away, which they will. But because the workers are going to be getting a lot of these benefits, that they pledged to not go on strike. There were, like I said, a bazillion strikes that went on, but you did have a lot of unions saying, all right, we're getting these positive things, so during the war, we won't go on strike. So again, trying to work out issues between labor and government to ensure the continuation of production of what's necessary for the war. Well, who's working in the factories? Because, the fact of the matter is you have a lot of white males that are going to be serving overseas. and a lot of minorities as well. I mean, all different minority groups, from Hispanics to African Americans, which we'll look at in a little bit, are going to be part of the military war effort. But there are also going to be a lot of them here in the United States. So if you look at who's going to be working in the factories, because so many white males are fighting in the military, it opens up the possibilities. It opens up so many opportunities for people who never got to experience these things. So you have African Americans, Hispanics, and I have another slide on women, I think, right after this one. So you're going to have, again, increased opportunities for different minority groups to be able to work in factory jobs that they never had been able to work in before. You had a lot of Hispanics that came from either Mexico or from places like Arizona, New Mexico, and they headed up to the northern factories. So it was a positive thing for them. Even African Americans, it'll be easier for them to find work. There's still going to be some discrimination going on, of course, though. Very important when it comes to women, and we talked a little bit about this when we looked at women's suffrage in the last unit. So women are going to play a huge role in the factories in the United States and producing the war materials necessary for the Allies to win the war. You had about 1 million women working in war-related industries, and again, performing a lot of jobs that they never really had the ability to do. Working in shipyards, building airplanes, working on docks. And of course, you still have your typical pink-collar jobs that are going to be like the clerical work. And even in the military, we'll find that the women are going to have positions available to them as well. So because women played such a significant role in the war effort, as we mentioned in our last unit, they're going to use this as leverage in order to gain their right to vote. Wilson needs women working in the factories. So once women start really pushing and they start comparing him to Kaiser Wilhelm over in Germany, it makes him look like pretty much a freaking idiot. So he eventually, again, is going to kind of sign on to this idea of a constitutional amendment, which will become the 19th Amendment. However, I don't think he would have necessarily supported it unless the war situation was actually going on. So here's a propaganda poster promoting women's suffrage and using the fact that so many women were working in the factories. We are ready to work beside you, fight beside you, die beside you, let us vote beside you. So really pushing for women's suffrage. And again, World War I was one of the main reasons, if not the main reason, why women will get that right to vote. So then this brings us to another topic, which I find just absolutely fascinating. The idea of dissent during the war, because of course not everybody is going to agree with us entering World War I. As we mentioned before, tons of Americans were isolationist minded, and that'll continue during the time that we're actually in the war. Now, Wilson believed that we had to do whatever we possibly could to, quote-unquote, train our nation for the war. So he believed that there were enough people in the United States that possibly were anti-war that he had to make it a government priority to get people on board through propaganda. He backed something called 100% Americanism, whatever that means. And then, you think about what progressivism as a whole is all about in terms of reform and free thinking and things like that. So, a lot of people will say some of the things that Wilson does kind of goes against the reform spirit of the time period. So you can judge for that. You may say that, you may think that most of the stuff that he does is necessary, because if you think about it, if you're in a major war like this, can you actually have a huge chunk of the population who is in dissent? If you don't have the vast majority of people going along with the war, how can you wage the war? So, again, you may think that this is something that the government absolutely needed to do, which is perfectly fine. So let's go ahead and look at some of the things that Wilson's going to do. All right. Oh, what is this? I can make it rain. Whatever happened to El Nino? I actually have El Nino in my hands. I can make it rain. Have you guys ever seen these? It's called a rain stick. I think it's Indonesia. It's Indonesian. So I can make it rain. I can also make funny noises. Funny facials. Alright. George Creel in wartime propaganda. Hey, this is a guy that you need to know. So George Creel. I'm not sure what I think about him. I don't know. George Creel. So he was the head of a government agency, which you need to know, which is the Committee on Public Information, the CPI. And the goal of the CPI was basically to create propaganda to promote support for the war. The job was to educate citizens on democracy, unity, wanted to assimilate immigrants. And remember, again, we have lots of German immigrants, we have Russian immigrants, a lot of the different belligerents of the war we have living in our country. So assimilate those immigrants to be good little Americans. I guess that's part of what 100% Americanism is all about. Is try to create some type of a national ideology. This is who we are as Americans, 100% Americanism. USA, right? So that's the goal of the CPA. They're going to do some other kind of shady things, which we'll look at. Like this right here, actually. So one of the things, and you can see on this poster here, is Committee on Public Information, so it's a CPI. So one of the things that the CPI is going to do, obviously, they're going to be responsible for a lot of government propaganda, like all these posters and things like that. They're also going to put together like literature-type pamphlets that would be passed out at shopping areas, movie theaters, and all that. And speaking of movie theaters, actually, since I'm thinking about that, and it's the next thing on the bullet point there were these things called 4-Minute Men, which is kind of interesting. So you go to the movies, you're going to go see, the big blockbuster of the day, like Birth of a Nation or whatever. And a lot of times before the film would actually play, you would have some dude get up there and he would give a 4-minute speech. And he would talk about why we needed to be part of the war, why the Allies are the best, why the United States is the United States, and yay democracy, yay capitalism, all that kind of stuff. So it was basically this 4-minute propaganda talk on why we needed to be part of the war effort and why the United States is better than the Central Powers, specifically Germany. They would do a lot of like anti-German propaganda and talking about the Germans and like they were monsters and uncivilized beasts and whatever. So, they're trying to get out there and to convince Americans that we're doing the right thing. Now, I have here that they hope to inspire patriotism without inflaming passions, but I'm going to be honest with you that a lot of things that the 4-Minute Men and the CPI are going to do the exact opposite. They are going to inflame passions because, you get these guys out there and they're talking about, these Germans raping women and things like that, and it gets people pretty irritated. So, like by 1918, you have a bunch of speakers that are inciting inflammatory stories of alleged German atrocities, and it's going to cause a lot of Americans to really begin to think that we're doing the right thing because these Germans are just a bunch of barbarians, and we need to help all of the people, the poor people who live under this repressive government and whatever. So this is also to be blunt as well. A lot of these inflammatory stories and the things the 4-Minute Men are doing and whatnot, it's going to cause problems for German Americans here in the United States, unfortunately. Of course, some of the propaganda. And this poster, by the way, I believe it was originated in the Spanish-American War. So it's not the first time that we see this, but I'm sure you guys have seen that propaganda poster. But one of the things the CPI was responsible for was getting guys to enlist in the military. In using propaganda to instill fear, to instill patriotism, wake up America, civilization calls, every man, woman, and child, everyone has to take part. The CPI will do a good job at making this into a total war. Taking, like, for instance, the Food Administration's idea of victory gardens and wheatless Wednesdays and promoting that kind of stuff. So another thing that the CPI is going to be doing is trying to encourage conformity. And I think, this is really that idea of 100% Americanism. And then going back to this slide, where was it? Going back to, right, this one right here. Attempting to create a national ideology. So I think that this idea of conformity was something that the CPI and the government really wanted to encourage. We don't want dissent in the United States, essentially. And unfortunately, what this is going to cause is kind of a Big Brother situation where you have such high suspicion, especially of like German immigrants, that you've got neighbors spying on neighbors. And it gets worse, like, World War II and Cold War and all that, but it all kind of starts during this time. So you'll have neighbor spying on neighbor, turning people in and whatnot. You had the development of the American Protection League, and they went around like neighborhood watches type of a thing, looking for behaviors of certain people living in communities that was inconsistent with what a true American was all about. There was a lot of pushing for recent immigrants to become 100% American. So again, trying to assimilate these people in. Again, some of the more ridiculous things. I think I may have brought this up in class, like the song "O Tannenbaum," "O Tannenbaum, O Tannenbaum," or "Oh Christmas Tree, Oh Christmas Tree." So songs like that, German songs, were torn out of songbooks. At my old school in Brea years ago, like when I went to high school, we actually offered German as a foreign language. That can no longer be taught in schools. We had things like sauerkraut was called Liberty cabbage, hamburgers, Liberty sandwiches. The one on the bottom is probably the most ridiculous thing in the world, kind of funny actually. So there was this huge influenza epidemic, like 1918, 1919, like literally millions of people died from the flu. And I don't know how this rumor got started, but there was this rumor going around that somehow Germans were inoculating Americans with this deadly influenza virus. And I don't know how that rumor started going, but like I said, there were millions of people that died from that influenza, and a lot of Germans were blamed for that. One of the things that was encouraged is that be careful who you talk to. So looking at this propaganda poster, "Don't talk. The web is spun for you with invisible threads. Stop and think. Ask yourself if what you are about to say might help the enemy. Spies are listening. Shh, spies. Look around you. Who could it be? Who can it be now? Who can it be now? Shh, spies are listening." Oh my god, I'm so tired. Okay. So, again, being careful who you talk to. Another phrase that was kind of popular during this time was "loose lips sink ships." So make sure you don't say the wrong thing to the wrong person. Oh, there it is. Loose lips sink ships. I had no idea that was on here. I forgot. Alright, super important. The Espionage Act and the Sedition Act. Man, these things are pretty crazy. So basically, the Sedition Act is you cannot speak out against the government. The Espionage Act is an anti-spy type of legislation. So you can't do anything that might be considered spying against the United States. Okay. Now we're more really concerned, I think, with the Sedition Act. With this, so many things are going to happen as a result of the Sedition Act. For instance, you couldn't criticize the government. You couldn't criticize Wilson. You couldn't write anything that criticized the government. The government had power to ban treasonous materials from the mail, and that one's going to be kind of important because certain groups like the American Socialists, the American Communists, that are going to be watched during this time, and any mailings coming out of those groups are going to be looked at by the federal government. So when we're looking at the idea of anti-war speech and people who dissent during the war, we're looking at the government really targeting certain groups. It's not going to come up to Leeming, and be like, oh, Leeming has a bottle of lemonade in her room, or got her little red book. I'm not going to, well, maybe they'll come after me. I seriously doubt it, but they're really looking at these big organizations, especially the Socialist Party. So the government's going to ban disloyal speech, writing behavior that might incite or promote the cause of the enemy. And this is where some people are going to get into problems, which we'll look at momentarily. The problem, I think, with the Sedition Act is really, what is sedition? What constitutes speech that could be construed to promote the cause of the enemy? So, if I was to say, I hate Obama, or Obama's the worst president in the world, which I don't necessarily believe, but what if I was to say that kind of stuff? I mean, technically, we're still in a war right now, so would that be considered sedition? What if I went out into the middle of the street and I started yelling out things like, Obama sucks? What would happen? What if I literally stood in the middle of the street with signs, about anti-Obama signs? What is considered sedition? So I think that the problem with this is that sedition really wasn't defined. What does that mean? So because it was defined so loosely, it's going to be pretty easy for the government to put people in jail, to convict them for speech that we hear kind of on a daily basis in today's society. And you can see that over 1,000 people are actually going to be convicted over the espionage and sedition acts. And again, like I said, that we're looking mostly at the government focusing on certain groups. And this is kind of foreshadowing what is to come, because after the war, we're going to have the first Red Scare in the United States, where because Russia is going to turn to communism in 1917, and it scares the heebie-jeebies out of us, and we think there's a bunch of communists in the United States. So we want to rid our country of these things that are not 100% Americanism. So we want to get rid of these things. So the Sedition Act is going to enable the government to really focus on those groups. And remember, the IWWs, International Workers of the World, they were a socialist labor union. Still around today, actually. What else do I want to say about this? Nothing right now. Okay. Oh, and that brings us to Eugene Debs. Very, very interesting dude. So here's the thing with Eugene Debs, because he's going to land himself in jail. So he gives us this anti-war speech, which I'll give you guys a copy of it, or I'll put a link to it in Classroom or something. Basically, what he said was that the government was lying. Oh, go figure that. The government was lying. That Wilson is saying, we are going into the war to make the world safe for democracy. This is a war to end all wars. Peace without victory. All these idealistic statements. Wilson's going to say that is a bunch of crap. That is not what is going on. Basically, this is about money. It's about economics. That basically we are involved in the war because it is enriching the upper classes. Like I said, when it came to the government contracts that are going to be put out there, this business is going to be creating tanks, this one's going to be doing airplanes. Again, it's not these mom and pop type businesses that are going to be making the uniforms and the tanks and the airplanes and the guns and all that. It's these big giant corporations. So who is benefiting? It's the government. It is the big business. Okay? So he's going to say that Wilson is lying about all of this. He says that the master classes declare the war while the subject classes fight them. And this is, God, I mean, this is such a poignant statement, because when you look at war, and this will be a really big point when we get to Vietnam, the fact that who declares war? It's not the lower classes, it's not the poor people, it's the upper classes, for the most part, that are declaring war. And it's the lower classes, the people in poverty, who are fighting them. So again, who is being enriched by this? It's the upper classes. They're declaring war because it makes them wealthy. They don't have to fight in it. Go let all these other people die. So, Debs is going to say this is wrong. Remember, Eugene Debs is a socialist. So, he says this is absolutely wrong, that you got to get up off your butt and you have to resist this. It's your duty to resist. So again, he gives a speech. He's saying the government's lying. He's calling out Wilson. He's calling out the wealthy. So of course they put him in jail because he violated the Espionage Sedition Acts. So he's put in jail for 10 years. He doesn't serve all of that. I think he serves maybe a few years or something like that. But he did run for president from jail, which is kind of interesting. And he'll get quite a few votes. And I love this. This is propaganda. Or not propaganda. It's a campaign button that was put out by the American Socialists to promote him for president. For president, convict number 9653. I love it. And then you got this guy. This is one of those landmark cases that you need to know. All right. So this guy, Charles Schenck. So he was the general secretary of the American Socialist Party. So the American Socialist Party, they had a bunch of pamphlets out there, kind of like the same thing with Eugene Debs, kind of calling out the government, saying that it's a bunch of baloney in terms of this is why we're going to war. So one of the things that Schenck is going to do, it's a little bit different, I think, than what Eugene Debs was deliberately calling for. Was this guy and the American Socialist Party going to be calling for Americans to resist the draft? So you get drafted, don't go type of a thing. So he'll get arrested for violating the Espionage Sedition Acts, and he actually will be found guilty. It'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says that this type of speech is not protected. That if you have a type of speech, and this wasn't a pamphlet, but it's still considered speech. He was out in an open square also, and he was reading his pamphlet. So the Chief Justice was Oliver Wendell Holmes, and he's the guy who is going to write the official opinion for the court. So what he is going to say, and again, super, super important, maybe you've heard this phrase before, that if speech constitutes a clear and present danger, then that speech is not protected. Remember, there is no such thing as absolutes when it comes to your rights, your civil rights. And so the Supreme Court is saying in this particular case, if something presents a clear and present danger, then it's not protected. So this guy was put in jail. So I'm going to put this on pause for a second. I'm going to go run. I'm going to get the actual pamphlet, and I'm going to read it to you. So give me a second. Oh my God. It has been a long day. Okay, so I'm going to read Schenck's pamphlet to you. So this guy's standing out in some public square somewhere, and these things were actually mailed using the United States Post Office Service. So take a listen. Assert your rights. The Socialist Party says that any individual or officers of law entrusted with the administration of conscription regulations, as the draft, violate the provisions of the United States Constitution, the supreme law of the land, when they refuse to recognize your right to assert your opposition to the draft. In exempting clergymen and members of the Society of Friends, those are the Quakers, from active military service, the examination boards have discriminated against you. If you do not assert and support your rights, you are helping to deny or disparage rights, which it is the solemn duty of all citizens and residents of the United States to retain. In lending tacit or silent consent to the conscription law, again, giving consent to the draft, in neglecting to assert your rights, you are, whether knowingly or not, helping to condone and support a most infamous and insidious conspiracy to abridge and destroy the sacred and cherished rights of a free people. You are a citizen, not a subject. You delegate power to the officers of the law to be used for your good and welfare, not against you. They are your servants, not your masters. They're talking about the government here. Their wages come from the expenses of government which you pay. Will you allow them to unjustly rule you? No power was delegated to send our citizens away to foreign shores to shoot up the people of other lands, no matter what may be their internal or international disputes. to draw this country into the horrors of the present war in Europe, to force the youth of our land into the shambles and bloody trenches of war-crazy nations, would be a crime the magnitude of which defies description. Words could not express the condemnation such cold-blooded ruthlessness deserves. Will you stand idly by and see the Moloch of militarism reach forth across the sea and fastening its tentacles upon the continent? Are you willing to submit to the degradation of having the Constitution of the United States treated as a mere scrap of paper? No specious or plausible pleas for a war of democracy can becloud the issue. Democracy cannot be shot into a nation. It must come spontaneously and purely from within. Democracy must come through liberal education. Upholders of military ideals are unfit teachers. To advocate the persecution of other peoples through the prosecution of war is an insult to every good and wholesome American tradition. You are responsible. You must do your share to maintain, support, and uphold the rights of the people of this country. In this crisis, where do you stand? Are you with the forces of liberty and light, or war, darkness? That is Charles Shank's pamphlet. That is what he got sent to jail for. And by the way, while I'm looking at it, I'm looking at Eugene Debs. He ended up serving 2 years, 8 months in the Slammer, and President Harding, who becomes president in 1920, will commute his sentence, so he won't serve all 10 years. Anyways, so I want you guys to think about, what do you think about that pamphlet? Do you think that should be protected speech? Should he have been put in jail? Again, this is wartime, and sometimes when you have circumstances like this in wartime, that this type of speech may not be the best for the overall good of the country. So I want you guys to think about this. Should this guy have been put in jail under the Sedition and Espionage Acts? And I think they actually got him for the Espionage Act. Let me just double check that. Yes, so he was actually convicted under the Espionage Act of 1917. So that's what got him. And I think it's because that dealt with using the mail system to do this kind of stuff. Anyways, so should he have gone to jail, or should this have been protected speech? Again, Oliver Wendell Holmes is going to make the argument that if you have words that present a clear and present danger, the classic example of this is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. Okay, so by this guy standing up there and saying this, does it actually present a clear and present danger? So that's something that I'm going to have you guys write a little bit on. Let me minimize myself and see what we have after this here. So that brings us to the Americans arriving in France. Let me put it on pause for a second and see if I'm going to move on. Hold on. Say hi to Abby. Where's Abby? Play the Abby Blues song. Abby. Oh, that stuff just pretty much sucked. Abby Blues. Abby. There she is. Abby. 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 Oh well. I tried to get the Abster in there and play the Abby Blues. Alright, well, that's gonna be about it, I guess. I'm pretty much done. I'm tuckered out. I got all kinds of stuff. good night, good weekend, a good day. I'll see you on Tuesday. Yeah.